Hello and welcome to my channel, Joyce's Affordable Glam Life 360, or just Joyce. I'm on here today with Unsolved Mystery Thursday, and this mystery is about the princess in the tower. So if you would like to know what this mystery is all about and to see how I achieved this look, then keep on watching. In 1483, the rightful king of England, 12-year-old Prince Edward V, and his younger brother Richard disappeared from the Tower of London amid rumors of murder. For more than 500 years, Richard III has been accused of orchestrating this atrocity. There is new evidence that reveals that Richard may not have had anything to do with this. Could he have been a victim of Tudor propaganda? The princes were last seen, it is believed, as late as July. There is no confirmed date of the last time they were seen, though. It is believed that neither of the princes ever left the tower. There is no record of them leaving. What is more mysterious is there is no record of them at all past 1483. So the question is, what happened to the princes? Could the princes' names just slipped out of recorded history? This is unlikely because the public noted their absence. They noted their absence at the time of their disappearance. Is it possible that they were hidden away to avoid more conspiracy against them? Yeah, that's possible if they could have proven they were legitimate. Edward would have been able to retake the crown then. The problem is there's no record of this either. Could the new king have ordered them to be killed? This could be a more plausible theory. King Richard III was killed in battle 3 years after taking the throne, which paved the way for the Tudor dynasty. It may be more likely that one of the Tudors killed the princes in the Tower of London. It is uncertain that the princes were murdered. However, there are rumors based on eyewitness claims that King Richard III had them murdered. Articles have been written about these many theories and possible murders of the brothers. Sir James Tyrrell, King Richard's servant, is one plausible murderer. Some people say he confessed under the torture that he killed the princes in the tower as he was ordered to. Really quickly, it seems like I kind of go with the same color shades, but I am using the I Heart Revolution chocolate cherry palette. Supposedly, someone smothered the princes with a pillow and then buried them underneath a set of stairs. This matches up with the evidence that was found in the Tower of London in 1674. The skeletal remains of 2 children were found in a chest beneath the chapel stairs in the tower. The remains were taken to Westminster Abbey and buried there, near some of the siblings of the princes. In 1933, the bones were exhumed and examined. They were also photographed. The doctors who performed the examination concluded, based on several clues, the bones could belong to the princes. Authorities at Westminster Abbey have forbidden further examination of the bones to date. Scientists have studied the photographs that were taken and have come to their own conclusions. Edward was born in London in 1470. His brother Richard, Duke of York, was born in 1473 in Shrewsbury. Their parents were Edward IV and his wife Elizabeth Woodville. Edward IV had come to the throne as a result of the Wars of the Roses and managed to restore a certain amount of stability to the country. On April 9, 1483, Edward IV died suddenly at the age of 1240. His eldest son was proclaimed Edward V at Ludlow. Edward's uncle, his father's brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was named as Edward V's protector. Prince Edward, or King Edward V, was the oldest son of King Edward IV and next in line to be King of England. His mother was Queen Elizabeth Woodville. Edward was born in Westminster Abbey in 1470 and sent to Ludlow Castle to be educated. Prince Richard I, Duke of York, was Edward's younger brother and the second son of Edward IV and his queen. Richard was married to the 5-year-old Anne Mowbray when he was just 4 years old. Again, this is the times, this is how things were done. As much as it sounds, wow, the age, this was the day that things like this happened. So the princes had a half-brother on their mother's side, and he used to play a role in the prince's disappearance. His name was Lord Richard Grey. The death of King Edward IV made Edward, at the age of 12, king. 12 years old, king. Wow. His brother Richard was just 10 years old at the time of their father's death. Upon King Edward IV's death, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, became the young prince's protector. He became their protector because of their young age, of course. The coronation ceremony of Edward V was to be held on June 22nd, 1483. When his father died, he was at Ludlow Castle, so he left for the Tower of London, where his coronation was to begin. His half-brother and Lord William Hastings accompanied him, amongst others. The Duke of Gloucester, King Richard, as well as a group of co-conspirators, intercepted King Edward V's entourage in Stony Stratford. As a result, Lord Richard Grey and Lord William Hastings were arrested and imprisoned. Later, Lord William Hastings was beheaded when the Duke accused him of conspiring to assassinate him. King Edward V was taken from Stony Stratford to St. Paul, unharmed and under the impression that he was still to be crowned king. Richard, his little brother, was taken to Westminster Abbey with their mother. Edward was later brought to the Tower of London, where he was supposed to be anyway. Young Richard met him there on June 16th, 1483. King Edward V was allegedly engaged to Lady Eleanor, King Ed. There's a lot of the same names, and then it's what Roman numeral they were, and it can be a little confusing. King Edward IV was allegedly engaged to Lady Eleanor Talbot before he married Elizabeth Woodville. It seems that the couple never married, which means that this engagement would have made the king's marriage illegal, or acts of bigamy were considered null and void. If the marriage was illegal, the children of that marriage would in turn be illegitimate. On June 25th, 1483, these accusations would work in the Duke of Gloucester's favor. Parliament concluded that the engagement had taken place. For this reason, the princes were not legitimate heirs to the throne. The Duke of Gloucester became King Richard III. At the Tower of London, King Richard III imprisoned one of his late brother's lovers, Jane Shore. He was not happy with his brother's love life. Or perhaps it was because he might have been a little jealous of his brother's love life. Who knows? So the question is, were the twins murdered by their uncle or someone else? Or did they secretly go into hiding? Richard had the most to gain from eliminating his nephews, but he was not the only king to be menaced by rival claims to his throne in the late 15th century. After defeating Richard at 1485's Battle of Bosworth, Henry, I can't remember what numeral it is, I believe it's Henry VII, was confronted by two pretenders to his own crown. Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck. Warbeck claimed to be Richard of Shrewsbury. Another theory this conjures up is rebellions have inspired the continued survival of the young princes. Did Richard spare them rather than ordering their deaths? It is not for certain that the princes died while in Richard's custody. Many writers have suggested that at least one of the brothers survived, perhaps by being smuggled from the Tower across the sea. Another theory could have been one of the princes may have been spared by their would-be murderers. After murdering Edward V, the killers took pity on younger brother Richard. When the prince's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, sent her daughters out of sanctuary and into Richard III's care in the spring of 1484, could she have really sent her daughters to King Richard knowing he had killed his nephews months earlier? Her daughters were a threat to Richard. Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter, was to marry Henry Tudor if he could win Richard's throne. But in the end, they all survived. So maybe she knew her sons were alive and safe. Elizabeth of York kept a book that belonged to her Uncle Richard and signed her name beneath his. If King Richard III had killed her brothers, it seems unlikely she would have kept the book and signed her name beneath his. It is quite interesting that none of those who were closest to the princes made any accusations against King Richard III. Elizabeth Woodville lived until 1492, but she never accused Richard of the prince's murder. Their sister, Elizabeth of York, was queen until 1503. When she had her own dynasty to protect, she and her sisters remained silent on the fate of her brothers. Between 1513 and 1519, Thomas More wrote History of King Richard III. He claims that one of Richard's henchmen, James Tyrrell, confessed to the prince's murder. There is no evidence to support More's version of events, though. There are also errors in More's version of events. There are those who say rumors of the prince's death emerged as part of a major uprising against Richard III in October 1483, but does say the rumors are true. There are those who strongly believe the evidence they do have is strong enough to believe the young princes were murdered. For one thing, too many people stood to gain from the prince's demise. Richard III was only king because of the prince's illegitimacy. Parliament could have overturned their status as being illegitimate. There would always remain the possibility that the princes could one day seek to recover their stripped inheritance. Richard may not have been concerned about his present position, but he may have wanted to safeguard the crown that he would pass on to his son and then inevitably his grandson. The War of the Roses was a dynastic fallout several generations after the deposition of Richard II. Nobody could have foreseen the issues that arose in 1399, but in 1485, the third Richard would have been acutely aware of the dangers a latent claim could have one day posed. Others believe that there were others who stood to prosper from the prince's death too. Duke of Buckingham, who for a short time soared under Richard III and the father-son team of John and Thomas Howard. They had seen their claim to dukedom of Norfolk dismissed in favor of the young prince's Richard. Richard's forfeiture of his land and rights, as well as his disappearance, paved the way for the Howards to receive the Norfolk title, which the family still retains today. I've heard of the Norfolk. I think that's how you call it. I've heard of that like just from royalty information, or seeing them, well, like for the royal weddings and things. The majority of the principal suspects had vast affinities swollen with men who sought to rise with their masters, giving lesser-known figures around London incentive to dispense with the princes to advance their own careers. And Yorkist opponents of Richard III would have put forward a Welsh Lancastrian nonentity like Henry Tudor as a plausible contender for the throne had there been any doubt that the princes had been killed. What is sad is the deaths of the princes were a necessary evil to secure the futures of the sitting dynasties at the time of that time. Well, and I would imagine just going forward, the lack of evidence regarding the princes does not suggest that they survived. As 1483 progressed, their presence was a risk that exposed many who stood to gain from their demise. So, another great mystery, the Princes in the Tower, which is what they are officially called. And so what happened to these princes is unknown. But likely, I assume, in my opinion, that I feel that they were murdered in whether it's King Richard, their uncle, who did it, or somebody else who had to gain by them not being around. Just for the simple fact, there would be too many questions if they had lived later on, coming back to reclaim their rightful inheritance. So I feel that they would have gotten rid of them to make sure that that didn't happen. And then, so unfortunately, the times that this took place, I feel that, well, I just feel that there's certain people who, want the power, and as much as you want to believe that because they were family, King Richard would not have done anything to his nephews, he may have been trying to protect his own family. So who knows? But in the end, this mystery will continue because of the fact that Westminster Abbey has banned anybody from looking at the picture or exhuming the bodies that are there to study more. So we probably will never know if those remains are of King Edward V and his brother Richard. We'll probably never know for certain, unless they were to open it up and exhume the bodies and see if those skeletal remains are of those kids. Because though that they say the age range is pretty much close to what the children's age would have been at the time, I mean, how likely or unlikely would it be that these remains would have been at the tower under the stairs, and it wouldn't have been the princes. I don't know. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up. It helps me out. If you are not subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you already are subscribed to my channel, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your love and your support. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.